I've restored the saved version of TrappedBlacks.ai found inside the 11 printing folder. In this exercise, I'm going to introduce you to the Print Dialog Box's color management options, which in stark contrast to those PostScript-only graphics options that we saw in the previous exercise, are extremely useful to a wide variety of users, by which I mean you. And it's very possible, if not in this exercise, definitely in the next one, that I will pass along a trick that will increase the color quality of any documents that you're printing inside your home or office. However, before we visit the Print Dialog Box, I want to provide you with a little bit of background where this specific document is concerned, and actually this goes for all print documents that you create inside of Illustrator. I'll go up to the File menu, and I'll drop down to the Document Color mode, and you can see that it's spec'd as CMYK color, which is ideal for a print graphic. So far, so good. Most of the documents that I'll be sharing with you over the course of this and the future series are spec'd as CMYK. And I created this document from the New command, of course, under the File menu. And I had set the document profile to print, which automatically sets the color mode down here to CMYK. All right, so I'll cancel out of there. Now, the reason I bring that up is because if you go to the Edit menu and you choose Color Settings, we're going to be visiting a few commands here. When you choose the Color Settings command, which we did way at the beginning of the series, then you'll see that we specified that the CMYK working space be US Web-Coded SWAP v2. And that's a very common space here in the States. SWAP, by the way, stands for Specifications for Web Offset Publications. And you can learn more about that group, if you like, at swap.org. But the important point is this: each new CMYK graphic that I create is going to subscribe to this working space, just as every new RGB graphic that I create is going to subscribe to Adobe RGB. All right, I'll cancel out of there. And just to confirm that that is indeed the case, I'll go to the Edit menu and I'll choose Assign Profile. And I'll see that, yes, indeed, the profile that is currently at work inside of this document is the working CMYK profile, which is US Web-Coded SWAP v2. All right, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this guy as well. We're now ready to visit the Print Dialog Box. So go ahead and press Control-P or Command-P on the Mac. And in order to simulate a CMYK PostScript printer, I'm going to switch my printer once again to Adobe PDF. And then I'm going to click on Color Management. And notice now that indeed my document profile, which is fixed inside the Print Dialog Box, I can't change it here. I could have changed it using that Assign Profile command. It's set to US Web-Coded SWAP v2. So everything's exactly the way it should be so far. The printer profile is also set to that exact same color space. Now, I suppose that's possible. You might be working with a commercial printer that tells you to go ahead and leave the printer profile set to this space, in which case you don't have to worry about any sort of translation whatsoever, because you're going from one space to that exact same space. No conversion needs to occur. However, let's say that my commercial printer gives me a profile and they tell me how to install it on my machine, and then I go ahead and select it. And I'm just going to pretend, for the sake of demonstration here, that that profile is this guy right there, US Sheet-Fed Uncoded v2. And so I'll go ahead and select it. Now some sort of conversion might need to happen. Now, by default, Preserve CMYK Numbers is turned on. And notice, by the way, this is the most important thing I can convey about these options. When you hover over them, you're going to see a description down there in the description field just below my cursor. That description is great. Now, this is the funniest thing. All of Adobe's color management functions have great descriptions associated with them, which is a welcome departure from those standard whiny alert messages that Illustrator is so fond of delivering. But in this case, we're seeing some very useful information. What it's telling me is that if I leave CMYK numbers turned on, then any of my native objects, which means my path outlines, my text, and so on, anything that I color inside of Illustrator, those CMYK values will remain intact. They will not change at all. They will be communicated exactly to the printer. And also, if I import an image into Illustrator and it's spec'd as a CMYK image and there's no color profile attached to it, then it will not change either. However, if it's a profiled image, then some form of conversion will occur. If you turn this checkbox off, and you only do that, by the way, you'd only turn this checkbox off if you are utterly and completely confident about this printer profile, if you believe it to tears and you've tested it, then you could turn this checkbox off, in which case, by the way, you'll get this little warning that's telling you that every single item inside of your illustration is going to be changed. So in other words, all of your CMYK values are going to be modified on the fly during the printing process. So your actual document's not going to be harmed. The colors are going to convert on the fly. And the idea behind the conversion is that Illustrator is trying to maintain the same color appearance for your illustration. So it's doing it for all the right reasons, but in order for it to work successfully, this printer profile has to be spot on the money. Anyway, what you typically do is don't put that much faith in the printer profile, leave this checkbox turned on, in which case the various paths inside of our illustration are not going to change. However, what about all those background images? I've got 5 different copies of this background image here, all of which are spec'd as RGB graphics in the Adobe RGB space. So those will have to be necessarily converted from RGB to CMYK. And how's that conversion going to occur? Well, we've got this color handling option right there, and you can either put Illustrator in charge of the color conversion, or you can let the PostScript printer determine the colors. If you choose this option, by the way, then you'll lose your printer profile because that'll be spec'd on the fly. However, in our case, we're going to specify let Illustrator determine the colors, and I'm going to set that back to what I just set it to a moment ago, which was US sheet-fed uncoated V2. I'm going to want to show you that in just a moment, what that means. But in the meantime, we've got this rendering intent. Now, by default, it's set to relative color metric. And if you want the short story, I recommend you leave it set that way inside of Illustrator. It's a great policy. However, there's 3 other policies to choose from. Saturation, never use it. Long story short, it's for presentation graphics. It's great if you've got a red pie wedge next to a blue pie wedge in a pie chart, and you want them to be super saturated and really stand out on a slide. That's not what we're looking for here. Absolute color metric. And by the way, to see a description of any one of these spaces, you choose it first and then hover over it like so. Absolute color metric is going to do its best to find the nearest equivalent CMYK color, whether that color is in gamut or not. In other words, whether it's a reproducible color. So you can request colors in RGB, that is in these RGB background images, that are not actually reproducible in CMYK. But Absolute will do its best to find the nearest color equivalent. However, what that means is a lot of colors can get clipped. So you could end up where you have super saturated orange areas, for example. Those could end up flattening out. So you have a large area that's a single color, which is why something like relative color metric is so much better, because Illustrator actually goes ahead and tries to keep all the colors in gamut and then find the closest equivalents. The only thing potentially better where images are concerned, and this would be imported images, or if your artwork contains an awful lot of gradients, you might want to go with perceptual. Because what perceptual does is it gives up a little bit on trying to exactly match every single color in the document, and instead it tries to preserve the perceptual difference between neighboring colors so that you have nice smooth gradients and you have nice soft transitions inside of your imported images. Up to you whether you decide to go with perceptual, lots of gradients, lots of images, or relative colorimetric, high contrast graphic art. But in our case, I think relative colorimetric is going to be the best way to go, and then you would go ahead and print your document. If you know you're going from one color space to another color space, then you can more or less predict what that's going to look like. And I'll demonstrate how that works in the next exercise.